It's days like this I'm grateful to be alive. If only I could share the experiences that I have. If only I could share others' experiences that they have. If only we could exchange just one day of reality between us, where we can live in each other's shoes, yet we know that's completely impossible. It's one of the oldest philosophic concepts, and one of the greatest realities, the things that we can know, that we can never walk in another's shoes. We can empathize based on the standard of perception we have, but we can never walk in another's shoes with our own consciousness interfering. It would just never work. So we try the best we can to understand one another. It's a difficult thing sometimes. We want to accept people for who they are. We want to accept people for what they know, and realize that each person has a little bit to contribute to the greater whole, and we can all gain from each other's experiences. If you don't walk away from every situation, whether it's good or bad, with a greater understanding about life or yourself or others, then you're not paying close enough attention. If you're not learning a lesson from every negative thing that happens to you, then you're not looking at it correctly. The lives that we live, they're interesting. The moments where you can just step outside for a moment with a beer. I guess a lot of people drink beer regularly, but beer to me is a rare thing. I have one maybe once a month, it seems like. But summer comes and I can look up, and maybe years back I'd be talking about the contrails up here, or what a lot of people might call chemtrails. Of course, I don't play that game anymore. I shouldn't have even brought it up. I'm sure somebody out there will be like, you don't believe in chemtrails? I do. I just believe that chemtrails are sometimes used in military for chaff operations, spraying aluminum, and they have been used in cloud seeding and whatnot, but the persistent contrails are due to the tropospheric layering. And the troposphere, as the atmosphere is collapsing, the troposphere becomes more full of moisture, causing more persistent contrails. It is frustrating though. You look up and you see it and you think, who cares if it's contrails, chemtrails, or whatever? It's blocking the sun. It's ruining an otherwise perfectly sunny day. But it's small potatoes. I'm not going to be able to change that. It's funny, I hate to admit it, I guess I like to admit it, but over even the last 2 years, I've changed so much in my mind by constantly forcing myself to not be frustrated over stupid things. Because I hear my neighbor over there, and they're pounding some kind of hammer on some bricks or something, and the guys behind me, they have a blues cover band, and they play all kinds of classic rock kind of stuff, and I can hear them back there testing and doing drumming and whatnot. And on top of that, the wind's blowing, and I know it's probably hitting the microphone. 2 years ago, that would have frustrated me while I was making a video. And it's very strange to me, because you would think that as a channel becomes more, let's say, popular, as more subscribers come and I get more people, that I would be taking this more seriously as a channel. But in fact, it's gone the opposite direction. I care less and less about, basic presentation, no matter how hard I try, even when I want to make it something great. I've considered over and over in the last couple of years turning this into a help channel. Not a help channel, I hate even using that term. A philosophy channel that just talks about how to help people get better and be happier. And I just realized it's so egotistical. The more you learn, the more you realize it's nearly impossible to help people, especially if they don't want to be helped. And especially if they think that your ideas suck. And honestly, I'm kind of humble and timid on that front, because I don't think I know shit. I've got all kinds of problems. I look down on myself too, like everybody else does. I have, I wonder, am I a good enough parent? Am I a good enough human? And no, I don't need anybody to tell me I am. I get plenty of support and props. It's just, I don't know. It's a fine balance between ego and humility, and trying to find a place where I feel happy in this world, and I'm not hurting others, but I'm not hiding either, and I'm not abandoning my family or my friends yet. I'm not relying on them for all my personal awareness or knowledge. Just finding this balance has caused me a completely different perspective on life. And sometimes, I'll be honest, it's a forced perspective, man. I'll walk outside and I'll demand myself to look at something beautiful, a tree. I don't know who left it. I don't know if this was a comment that somebody left on one of my videos, but sometime today I heard a quote that stuck with me. It said, a pessimist will look through a window at a beautiful summer day, and all they'll notice are the spots on the window and the streaks and smears. And that metaphor I love it. It's absolutely beautiful. Because it shows more than just a metaphor for seeing things positive. Because looking through that window is your mind's eye. That's how you view everything, through your mind's window. And if your fucking window is dirty, then everything you think is going to be dirty. If you're tainting all of your experiences with negativity, you're going to pay the price for it. And that's the one thing it's like I want to tell people, I want to just cram it in their head, to just quit fucking moping. Pardon my language, but a lot of people are just constantly moping. I've met so many folks who all they have to say are negative things. Oh, well, you know, things just suck. And I'm not talking about people who are really having a bad time. I've even been known to, give crap to people who really are having a hard time, my mom included, let's say, when she's having a rough time, just because I get sick of hearing moping, even when it's legitimate moping. But I understand it, and I realize that not everybody mopes out of choice. They do it because things just aren't working and they're not getting enough support to feel good about it. I get that. And maybe that's all of our fault for not supporting them better. If people are moping to us, then perhaps we should consider why. Maybe they're not getting enough good, positive feedback. But then there are just whiners too. We all know them. I had a perspective shift some 10 years ago, which was interesting because my perspective was already, I considered myself a pretty aware person, and sometimes I think back and I don't give myself enough credit. I think, oh, I've been into, self-help and awareness and understanding myself for a few years now, and then I'm like, no, it's been more like a decade, and then I think, no, I started this shit when I was like 15. It's funny because I have these tattoos on my leg. I figure since I'm just sitting here with my leg, maybe I'll just show them. They're personal. Tattoos are usually personal. Hopefully that's focused in there. So this is something I just don't even talk about. This down here is my birth sign, number 7, my lucky number. This is the symbol for the earth. This is the chicken becoming the egg, or the chicken at one with the egg. It's an alchemical symbol that I learned more about later. This is the symbol for karma. This is the sun, or gold. And on top of the spiritual cross, as was popular back then, people were tattooing it. It's a cross with the yin yang on the top, symbolizing not only my central understanding of myself, but I guess the balance in life. And don't get me wrong, I made some stupid ass tattoos too. Skull and rebel. Somebody was like, hey, is it rebel or rebel? I'm like, I don't know. My friend and I called each other on the phone one day and said, hey, let's do the same tattoo. So we decided, what should we do on? We'll do rebel on the outside of our right calf, up a little higher. And when we met up the next day, I've got one like that big, and his is like this small. Fuck, maybe we should have talked about it in actual, size. Cracks me up. It's like I don't know, I like talking about just life stories. I don't do this very often because I always seem like I'm stuck on a particular subject, and people like talking about life stories, but I feel like people don't need to hear mine because there are enough of them. But the more conversations I have with people, the more I come to the conclusion that stories are everything. Stories are what life's about. when you tell a story, oh yeah, a friend told me about this time when he went up to this place and this happened. Those are the things that we discuss. Those are the moments that we connect on. And to me, my friend and I went up to the Mount Adams. See, my son and I went up last summer, and we had, let's just say, a UFO experience with some interesting lights. I went back with my friend Joel to the same spot, and we said, well, we'll just go here since it's a very spiritual spot to me, and it's up near a place called Panther Creek. We hiked in, we went down there, we hung out for a while, and then we ate mushrooms right before sundown. And we sat there next to each other. All we had was a tarp and our sleeping bags, basically, and a campfire, and some food. So we grabbed a hard cider, and we started eating these little, he had a grinder, and we ground up the mushrooms. And when they're pulverized, they digest a lot faster, believe me. And we ended up eating, basically, we split a half ounce, and I didn't know until I said, how much did we just eat? He's like, well, we had a half ounce. I'm like, oh my gosh, how much is left? And there was a little bit. Long story short, we had a very amazing experience that night, and we started talking about stories and how everything is about stories. And we started talking about the elders and what you might call the ancestors. And I know a lot of people that I've met on YouTube might think that I kind of blow those folks off, the ones who believe in these, these New Age type beliefs, which of course we all know are not New Age, they're just revamped. But the idea of, spiritual entities and layers of energy and all these things that I don't dismiss it. And among that are the elders, or what you might call some people call them the ascended masters. I'm not going to go as far as to say that, yes, people evolve to a point on this earth and then become ascended to these levels where they help humanity. I don't understand any of that or how that works. And I've studied it, all the information that's out there, and of course it's just subjective experiences, and it is what it is. I'm not getting into that aspect, but what I have realized is that among that, one of the recurring themes is storytelling. That the stories are what's important. The stories are what carry. It's very obvious. You can look at tribes. Look at all the tribes that still exist, that are still within their natural context somewhat. They all have stories, origin stories. When I was 18, 20 years old, I remember hearing about these origin stories of other tribes and thinking, how did they make this up? How did they come up with this crazy stuff? And it amazes me that it took me until I was in my 30s to realize that they were all metaphors for actual events in our lives, the things that happen to us as individuals. People talk about the dragon breathed the seed into existence, or the earth erupted with this and that, and people just popped out. Even the Native Americans and some of their talk about the Great Spirit and their particular beliefs. They all have their own beliefs, but they're not just thrown out of thin air. They're grown out of metaphors and ideas, archetypes, and it's through storytelling that we carry these things on. Before there were books, there were stories. Most of the books were burned before the printing press was invented. So a lot of those old books were destroyed, and we lost a lot of our history. But the oral tradition reminds us. So that kind of brings up an interesting concept, which is religion. And that's an argument that many religious folks have about being correct, is that how would a story endure so long unless it had some truth to it? And I would like to say that when I was younger, I believed that religion came out of ignorance completely. That people just believed what they were told, and the Bible was basically created to control. I no longer believe that. Now that I've studied and understand the Bible, it's comprised of a variety of stories over millennia that, over 1,000 years or so, 500 years, however long it was, and then eventually was edited down by the Council of Nicaea hundreds of years later, and they decided what went in the New Testament. And so a person can dispute the Bible all day long. The question one has to ask themselves is, why did 52 men, or 54 men, some of the very prominent, scholars, gather in a room for a long period of time and decide which books should be in the Bible? And was it encoded? There's even theories that Francis Bacon was involved, and he was one of them, and he encoded a lot of information. And this is why people talk about Bible code and whatnot. Ignore the numbers. Forget about the symbols. Nobody's going to hide the truth within the context, hidden within numbers and letters. You might find some information, but the truth comes from within. That means reading the metaphors. That means reading between the lines, which means you read a passage in the Bible and you don't take it literally. You take it metaphorically. But you don't take it so metaphorically that you miss the point. I remember hearing a guy talk about, there's a passage in the Bible that talks about, it says, cast your net to the right side of the boat. And he believes that meant use your right brain for making these decisions. He had a lot more to it. I don't even want to say the guy's name. It was Bill Donahue, because a lot of people don't like him. A lot of his theories are way outlandish. He's basically, back in the 80s and 90s, took the Bible he left being a Christian and decided to translate in his own opinion what the metaphors were for the Bible. He's very animated. He's very straightforward, honest. You can tell he means what he says, but it doesn't mean he's right. So take it with a grain of salt. But many of the ideas that are conveyed can be very true. I've looked at very simple ideas, like why certain stories are carried on. Why in the Quran they talked about swine being a filthy pig. Why is a pig filthy? Why is meat filthy when it's pig and not other meat? Well, it turned out that I read something about how back then they realized, because the resources were limited in the region, and farmers could use pigs to eat all their extra stuff, and they would eat just about anything. The problem was pigs ate a diet very close to humans, and they didn't eat grains and stuff like cows and sheep, right? And so you had to feed them what humans could eat. And on top of that, they didn't produce any milk or any byproducts. It was just meat, and you could harvest them once. So the thought is that the elders did decide to put into the Quran not to eat swine, not because it's a filthy creature as much as the fact that it damages the economy. So many of these old stories that are passed down are for economic reasons. And it's very interesting to watch the way that society kind of attaches to a certain way of living and never questions it, never asks, the source or the reason of it. This is my cat, Tigress. She's a sweetheart. She doesn't like to be held, but I demanded to pick her up for a minute. She's kind of a wild one. The stories that we pass down remind us of who we are. They remind us of why we're here and what we should be doing. And sometimes I think we need a good kick in the ass. Because, to be honest, at least once a day I sit and go, what the hell? Everybody does. Anybody who thinks that there's some, spiritualist out there or philosopher that doesn't have moments of panic and fear, they're deluding themselves. So, if I could leave with a parting word about the stories and about our history, I guess let me think about it for a minute. What could it be? I guess it would be that we're all trying. We're all trying to understand our lives in order to better live them. And I shouldn't say all of us, but many of us. Anybody who's watched my video this long, with my ranting, rambling, is probably somewhat on a page of understanding themselves, or at least trying to. Because people who aren't don't seek out philosophy. But if you're watching this and you're not into it, don't take my word for it. Explore who you are and understand it. I'll tell you something, sometimes when you have to look at everything like a metaphor. When you're doing construction on a house, the one thing that you might fear, and this is something that's happened to every carpenter, is you start tearing up the floorboards and you have rotten joists underneath. Oh my God. Then what? You have to tear out the whole floor and replace everything. But the more you do it, the more things you tear into. If you hit the drywall and the studs are rotten, you get into more trouble by opening up these walls. And that's how it is with your mind. When you open up your heart and your mind to who you are and your world, it's painful and there's a lot of damage, you realize. But once you start to rebuild that, you don't have a choice, and then you become structurally sound again. And you should train yourself to think in metaphors, to see everything as a metaphor, and to see every metaphor as something in your life, because it really is as above, so below, you know. Like that thing I said in a previous video my son said the other day. He was just like, hey, did you know that inside every atom is everything in the universe? And the universe is just an atom, and maybe somebody's looking down on us. And I'm just like, you know, kids understand the stories long before they're told. And you don't have to take it literally. I see a lot of folks who get really angry at people who believe anything. They get angry when people believe in things that they can't see, that they say they feel or just know. And they don't just say, I disagree. They get actually angry at them and say, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. You're deluding yourself. And you get to a point in life where you just don't care. You know? Say it must be miserable to live unhappily like that. But I guess that's going into a different realm altogether. As far as the stories, though, I mean, I guess, you know, everybody knows that old man who's a storyteller. And it's something to aspire to. Not just to tell your stories, but to tell other people's. And hopefully we understand as we get older that the stories we should tell, whoa, they gotta work on their tone. Hopefully we figure out in time that, you know, the stories that we do tell have to be important ones. They have to have a message, you know. So I guess that's it. It's become a long video. I guess it's long enough. I've said what I have to say. I'm gonna go on with my day and do whatever I'm gonna do.